everybody, and welcome back to the Hangout Spot where you already know it's Real Talk Sports Talk. Live from my man cave, it's your boy Johnny, and let's talk Jets because I want to give my take on this article that came out this morning by Rich Cimini from ESPN. Obviously, he's an ESPN staff writer. He covers the New York Jets. And it was an interesting story today around Zach Wilson. And it was entitled, "What Can the Jets Recoup for Quarterback Zach Wilson?" And I thought it was very interesting because it's obvious the Jets are going to look to trade Zach Wilson in the offseason, and I think that's the right move. It's best for both parties to just part ways and move in their separate directions. But what type of interest is out there? Like, what realistically can the Jets expect to get back for Zach Wilson right now? We all know that he ended the season on the bench. He was supposedly injured with a concussion the last couple of games. We never saw him after halftime in the Miami game. So it's not like he ended the season on a high note. So realistically, a lot of the things that were said in this article really didn't surprise me because I think his stock is extremely low, although he's a young guy with some talent. But to hear some of the things that they said from the people that they spoke to was interesting to me. And a lot of it I agreed with. And then there were a couple of things that I kind of caught me by surprise. And we'll get into that in a second. But anyhow, they actually spoke to NFL people, obviously anonymous sources. They spoke to 3 personnel execs. They spoke to 1 scout. They spoke to 2 assistant coaches from anonymous teams. And the consensus, obviously, right now is that Zach Wilson, at best, will probably get the Jets back a 6th or 7th round pick, a late round draft pick, which is not surprising. If they're lucky, they said in the article, the Jets may be able to get a swap for a middle round pick, but it's not likely. And that team that actually offers the Jets a late round pick will be looking to take on Zach as a backup. They'd be willing to take a chance on him due to his draft pedigree, being drafted 2nd overall. That's not a surprise either. I don't think Zach is going to get any interest from any team that wants him to come in and compete for a starting job. Unless, and this is another thing that they wrote, unless it's a team that felt strongly about him pre-draft, that could influence how they value him. And if the Jets are lucky, maybe that team would give them something more of a higher pick in the mid-rounds. And that's quite possible, right? I mean, I'm sure there were teams that really liked what they saw from Zach coming out of BYU. Jets took him. Now they might feel like they have the opportunity after 3 seasons to salvage him because there is some talent that they see. It's possible. I think it's unlikely because regardless of how you perceived him, during the draft, I think he's done enough in the last 3 seasons to kind of change that perception, both on the field and in the locker room. But again, anything is possible. But getting into the weeds of it, when we start to hear specifically what they said in the article, you had 1 scout that said the Jets could get lucky and get a 7th round pick for him. Not really much of a surprise, right? But then there was an assistant coach that basically went out there and said, "I'd only give up a 2-week stay at the Best Western. I'm not a fan." Which I thought was very, very comical, but very harsh. I mean, think about it. This is how this kid is perceived. This guy wouldn't even offer 2 weeks at the Hilton or the Holiday Inn, the Best Western. Wow. Brutal. So I thought it was funny, but again, I thought it was a little harsh, and it shocked me a little bit because he's young. There is a certain skill set in there that I think the right coaching staff can probably nurture. But they basically believe that the Jets will never get the value that they want and that the pressure is on them to find a trading partner because it would be extremely embarrassing for them to have to release a top 10 pick at quarterback. And that I totally agree with. And I don't think Joe Douglas wants to get into that nonsense of having to answer questions on how he released a quarterback that he picked with the 2nd pick overall. In some senses, fans feel like he was a major influence in making sure that they played him so they could try to justify the pick. Now all of a sudden, 3 years later, you release him. I don't think it'll bode well in one Jets drive. Joe Douglas seems like a pretty prideful guy, so I doubt he will even consider releasing Zack. I think that he's going to try his best to get whatever he can and find a partner. But then another assistant said that the only trade value that Zack has, realistically, is his arm talent, meaning he can make all the throws. But the biggest thing for him was he has to mature, he has to be consistent, especially with his decision making. There were flashes, but it wasn't enough. And I totally agree with that, especially the maturity part. And I've said this time and time again. I think that's where Zack Wilson has really faltered. And that's mostly due to negligence by the Jets. I don't think that Zack Wilson was ready mentally to be a quarterback in the NFL. He was thrust into action. And it showed on the field. You know, he's failed after 3 years to consistently read defenses. And that's where most of these young quarterbacks fail. They all have the physical traits to succeed. They can all make the throws. They're mostly athletic. But this is where they fail. And that's why I always say that I think it's beneficial for every young quarterback to sit at least a year or two behind a veteran quarterback so they can learn the nuances of how to play quarterback in the NFL from a mental standpoint. Not only will they help them, you know, see the games from the sideline, it'll help them break down film, it'll help them learn how to read defenses, it'll help them to be a leader when they finally get their turn. That way the physical traits can match up with the mental capacity, and then you have a finished product, a quarterback that can play in this league and hopefully get better and better. And that just didn't happen here. So yes, I do believe that the maturity part is where Zack has failed. I mean, you can look at it. You can look at it from his post-game interviews. I mean, you know, the way I see it, way too many we's. We got to get better. We got to do things better when it should be more I's. And it's true. They always say, a quarterback, when things are not going well, it should always be I. When things are going well, then it should be we, as far as the team. That's just how it rolls in that position. They are a leader. But I think, you know, stemming back for last year, it's blatantly clear that I don't know if he has a lot of friends on the team. I think he lost a lot of people in that locker room, especially after that Patriot game when he failed to take responsibility for his own plays. It ultimately led to him getting benched. It ultimately led to guys wearing Mike White t-shirts. So it was evident there was a divide in the locker room. I think the team gave up on him. And I don't think it's going to get any better here. There were flashes. But again, I agree. Just weren't enough, especially in 3 years. And then there were some Jet fans I was reading in social media that actually feel like the Jets can get more than what these executives say in the article. And they pointed to the Sam Darnold trade to try to justify that. They were able to get 3 picks for Sam Darnold, one of them being a second-round pick. Why can't they get something similar for Zack Wilson, who was drafted higher? Well, the reason behind that is it's quite simple. These are 2 different scenarios. When Sam Darnold was traded, he was traded as the starter. He was the starter of the Jets. Zack Wilson is the backup, or was the backup. Was the starter for the better part of the 3 years, but let's not forget he lost his job twice during that time frame where he got benched. So, truth be told, I was even shocked that the Jets got a second-round pick for Sam Darnold. I thought the best they were going to be able to do was a third-rounder. So they came off there. They got lucky. But that's not going to happen again. And make no mistake about it, these are 2 totally different quarterbacks with the way they handle their situations in New York. Sam Darnold was here. He had a lot of flashes. He was very inconsistent, but he didn't have a lot of weapons either. Didn't have the best coaching. But he always handled himself well with class. Never felt like teammates looked down on him or that he had lost a locker room. Totally different with Zack. Zack has had talent. Maybe not on the offensive line, but he's had weapons. I would love to see Sam Darnold here with Breece Hall, with Garrett Wilson. Things might have been different. So again, 2 totally different scenarios. And truth be told, one of the things that they also mentioned in the article is that backup quarterbacks usually garner a 6 or 7 round pick, a late round pick. That's just the way it works. In fact, they pointed out 5 quarterbacks in the last few years that were traded, and all 5 of them were traded for either a 6th or 7th. In fact, 4 out of the 5 were traded for a conditional 6th or 7th. So that's just the way it goes. He's a backup. And these are guys that they listed that has actually had some success in this league. I don't think we could consider Zack as that guy, at least not yet. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see the way the Jets go with it. They also pointed out that, salary could be a problem. Right now, Zack next year is going into his last year of a rookie deal. He's set to make $5.45 million, which doesn't seem high. But again, you're talking about a reclamation project here. Not a surefire backup, possibly even a third stringer. So the price tag may be high for certain teams. So it all depends on what the Jets want to do. Do they want to settle for a late round pick? They may have to eat some of their salary. I think they should definitely do it. They have time to think about it. I mean, trades don't become official until March 13th, but they're going to have to think long and hard about it. Because then I started thinking long and hard about it. Think about it and hear me out for a second, Jet fans, and don't throw anything at the TV. This is just a hypothetical. I started thinking about the way the Jets have the tendency of thinking, Joe Douglas in particular, with their actions throughout the years. What if let's say they are going out there with the intention of getting themselves at least a 5th round pick, and no team is offering them anything other than a 7th? What if they don't want to take on any salary, but the team that wants to trade with them wants to take up at least half of that salary? Do the Jets pivot and make the decision to bring Zack back and run it back? And instead of doing what they did this year by redshirting him, they try to justify to the fan base that they're going to do that this year, full year behind Aaron Rodgers and potentially a veteran. Do I see the Jets doing that? Think about it, Jet fans. They are totally capable of doing that. I thought at the end of the season there was no chance. And trust me, I tell you, I still think there's no chance. But I'm just playing a hypothetical. Joe Douglas, in my opinion, would rather bring him back than release him. That's how I see it. But make no bones about it. It was a thought. I don't realistically think that's a possibility. There's no way that can happen. These two sides will agree that they both need a fresh start, especially Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson doesn't want to be here. He hinted to people in the locker room he didn't want to play before the Houston game. That was obviously the truth. We all know that. He didn't want to risk getting hurt because he knew he was gone after the season. He will be the first to tell you he needs a fresh start. New York just isn't for him. Not with what he's been through here. Not with the way some of his teammates view him and have carried themselves. It's not going to happen here. He's gotten bashed by the fans. No way. He'd be the first to tell you, I'm gone. I need a fresh start somewhere else. And he'd be absolutely right. And from the Jets' perspective, move on from that distraction. Don't even try going into the season trying to convince fans that you are going to salvage this kid's career and redshirt him. Makes no sense. You should have did that last year. That ship has sailed. Let's move on. Let this kid have a fresh start somewhere else. You go out there, sign yourself a veteran quarterback. That way, in the event if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt next year, you got somebody that's capable to come in and run this offense and also lead this team as a man, as a leader of men. That's what you need here next year because the clock is ticking. You got a 41-year-old quarterback coming back from a major injury, and not everybody can play till they're 45. So you might have a year window. You got to make the most of it. You got to go for it. One last thing I wanted to touch on, and again, Zach Wilson, I do wish him the best. Steve Young said it a couple weeks ago, and we all know Steve Young is close to Zach Wilson and his family. When having gone to BYU, he said there was a few possible destinations that could possibly work out well for Zach, and he was spot on with all of them, including the Rams. I mean, the Rams was the first destination that he said that would be the best fit for Zach, and I totally agree with that. Sitting behind Matthew Stafford, a veteran quarterback who's won a Super Bowl, having been coached by Sean McVay, one of the more innovative, probably one of the best offensive minds in the game today, that would be a perfect situation for Zach to sit back and learn the position of quarterback. So maybe the Rams make a run at him. I don't think it would be a bad idea. Again, he's young. He has a certain skill set that I think can blossom in the right situation. He also mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs. He won't get to play there, but maybe he sits back for a couple years and learns behind Mahomes and Andy Reid, and maybe take a shot somewhere else as a backup job, as a backup quarterback. Green Bay Packers, he mentioned, another good situation. All depends on how the LaFleurs feel about him. Miami, Mike McDaniels, sitting behind Tua. I know Mike White is there, so that maybe or likely won't happen. But Baltimore Ravens, that would be another good landing spot. All these teams that I just mentioned are solid franchises with great coaching. They will all benefit this kid. And I think that with the right coaching, the right support around him, and him doing his part to mature, I think that he can be a serviceable quarterback down the road. Like I said, there is some skills there, but it'll never, ever flourish here in New York. So I wish him the best. We need to move forward with that and turn our attentions to what we're going to do to solidify the backup position for 2024. But anyhow, I just wanted to touch on that. Like I said, it was an interesting topic. It'd be interesting to see what the Jets do, how creative they get. Maybe they get lucky. Who knows? Like they did with Sam Darnold. They won't get a second, but maybe a fifth. Who knows? Anyhow, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what you think about it. We'll be doing some more Jet videos in the next coming week, talking about potential free agent targets, and we'll be talking about the draft, so make sure you continue to stay aboard for the ride. But as always, thank you for your support, everybody. This is your boy Johnny signing out from the Hangout Spot, and I'll talk to everybody soon.